mean, we on the right, we love the Constitution. I do too. Bill of Rights, everybody knows it. Freedom, limited government, all these things. Did we get it wrong in the beginning? And I realize what America was and how wonderful it was, but doesn't it make it inevitable that if you have a live and let live country, that you are eventually going to be infected with some kind of ideology that doesn't go along with any live and let live stuff? In fact, they want to dominate. Isn't that just human nature?
Maybe, but I do think that the Constitution was a noble experiment. You know, it grew out of an Enlightenment philosophy, and we did our best, they did their best to try to restrain the state with a piece of parchment. A lot of things went wrong in the meantime. Of course, there were some problems from the very beginning, you know, among which slavery, but many others. And unfortunately, over the last 100 years, especially, we've seen the rise of administrative states. So that's a very interesting case, right? Because we know who's in charge of this country right now. It's not the elected politicians, it's the permanent bureaucrats, right? So, and there are 435 agencies that rule without oversight really effectively from courts, and certainly not from the elected branches of government. That thing is not in the Constitution, right? So a return to the Constitution would actually fix probably 80-90% of the problems in this country. I'll mention one other thing too that I think is really interesting, and I wonder if you've thought about this. But the electoral map that we saw from the midterm showed a lot of geography that was painted red, and then just little tiny cities in each state that were painted blue, right? And that was a very strange thing. We've seen this, you know, again and again in many elections over the past. If it were not for the 17th Amendment, that would not be happening. The 17th Amendment allowed for the directional election of senators and in effect allowed big and urban centers to swamp the political influence of everybody who lives outside of them. Majorities in the large major cities are determining everything. I mean, New York would have 2 red senators if the 17th Amendment were not passed. So, I mean, the idea of a bicameral system of Congress is that one was supposed to be elected directly by the people, and the other was appointed by the state legislatures that themselves were representative of the whole geography and the whole people of the state, so that you wouldn't get this strange bias towards urban centers dominating and basically oppressing everybody else. So that was the 17th Amendment, and that it's not really a source of controversy. I think it probably should be, because it massively distorted the way the U.S. Congress works. Now, the 18th Amendment got rid of, implemented alcohol prohibition, and the 19th Amendment repealed that. So we have a precedent in this country for recognizing when we've made a constitutional error. And I would say the 17th Amendment is one of those things. Really, just the elections the other day would have turned out very differently without that little distorting twist that happened with the 17th Amendment, which I think was only passed in something like 1913.
Well, how do we undo it then if we're never going to have a supermajority in that way by enough places? I mean, it's one thing to say repeal it, and I agree with you 100%. How do we do that?
Well, for one thing, I think we need to start talking about it. That's one deal. And also, we need to get reasonable people back in charge of the Senate, which I think, it might have happened this time if we had played our cards right, but it didn't happen. It just means that we're going to put it off to the future. I think the crisis in this country is going to get bad enough that we can get majorities that are sensible and ready and brave and can make the requisite change that we need. The kinds of change we need is towards a more decentralized system, a dismantling of the administrative structures of the state, a restoration of the bicameral system of Congress. In other words, really restore that original Constitution the way they imagined things.
Don't miss Jesse Kelly Breaks History, Che Guevara, the latest episode of a new series available now exclusively for First TV supporters. Visit the First TV app or thefirsttv.com to subscribe and start watching today.